Hi, I'm Amirul Haji Muhammad, and you're watching Islamic Finance at the Capital. Today's special guest speaker is none other than the great statesman himself, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Today's topic of our discussion on Islamic Finance at the Capital is on the Islamic gold dinar. Tun, 1997, the Asian and Malaysian financial crisis had taken roots. I vividly remembered as if it was yesterday. We had just given a speech in KL on 22nd August 1997, and you had just opened the floor for questions. A gentleman with a Middle Eastern accent asked you, Dr. Mahathir, you claim to know the cause of the crisis and you claim to know the solution. What is your solution? The answer was, we must bring back and reintroduce the gold dinar. Dr. Mahathir, why the gold dinar and not defend the ringgit?
Well, the ringgit is really a domestic currency. What we had been using at that time was a US currency as a trading currency. So the US currency becomes a standard. But the US currency is subject to fluctuation. Whereas gold, although it fluctuates in price, in value, is more stable. So when you are doing business with another country, you want to make use of a medium or a currency that is stable. And gold is much more stable than the US dollar or any other currency. Although you can call it the dinar, gold dinar, you can call it by any other name, but the most important thing is that it's based on the value of gold.
Even though it's pegged to the US dollar, sometimes it follows the price of the US dollar in the London market.
Yes, but one has to remember that the US dollar was fixed at 35 US dollar per ounce of gold when Bretton Woods was in operation. Today, the US dollar is worth, the gold is worth 1,700 US dollar per ounce. Obviously, the US dollar has depreciated very much. So it is not really a stable currency.
Dr. Mahathir, you had suggested that we use the gold dinar initially in bilateral trade agreements or arrangements. Why bilateral and not multilateral?
It can be made multilateral, but the thing is we need to have a clearing house system. It's just like clearing checks on a daily basis as between transactions using checks belonging to different banks. At the end of the day, you have to reshuffle the checks to see who owes whom. That is a clearing house function. Now, if you have a bilateral trading, you need a clearing house to evaluate the amount of trade done, the amount of imports and exports, and then you pay the balance. So with two partners, it's much easier. But of course, it can be made with multiple partners. That is possible, but as a beginning, I thought that it is best to do it with just two countries.
And later on have a multilateral kind of arrangement?
Yes, yes.
Including barter trade between countries?
Well, eventually it becomes barter trade also, because you will be valuing the goods that you import and you export in terms of gold. And gold has a value in both countries. So when you pay in gold, the receiver knows the value of the goods he has traded in gold, and the person buying also knows the value of the goods in gold.
To Dr. Made, in 2002, you spoke at a conference called the Gold Dinar in Multilateral Trade Arrangement, where in your keynote address, you urged, in fact, pleaded with the OIC member countries to use gold dinar as a medium of exchange for trade purposes to replace the dollar. However, the response was, I would say, lukewarm at most, except for maybe Iran and Libya. What do you think are the reasons for the tepid response? Ignorance, apprehension of the repercussion from the Western countries, especially the main producer of paper money, the Americans or perhaps the Europeans, or did member countries totally miss the woods for the trees and just lost the plot?
Basically, it is fear of retaliation by the US government because when you don't use the US dollar, it depreciates in value. There is no demand for it, therefore it depreciates in value. And if the dollar depreciates in value, then it affects the US economy. So they want to maintain the use of the dollar because that creates a demand, gives value to the US dollar. And there is a fear that if you cause the US dollar to be devalued, America might take some action against you. It may even result in an invasion of your country. So I think it is fear that stops most countries from accepting the proposal to use the gold dinar.
Is it just only the Americans or the Europeans as well? Or is it just all the countries in the world who issued paper money?
No, I think mostly it is fear of the Americans because the US dollar is regarded as a trading currency. It's also the reserve currency for the whole world. And therefore, it is the US which will lose most if the US dollar is not in demand.
But basically, when you talk about the gold dinar, there's a saying, one ummah, one currency. Though not many of your political initiatives had the support from both sides of the political divide, the introduction of the gold dinar had the support of the opposition, namely PAS. Dato' Nik Aziz and Hadi Awang were both MPs when you made your speech, gave their support. Apart from minting the first dinar in Malaysia and creating intellectual discourse before you left office in 2003, no further development took place at the federal level. Did you drop the ball, so to speak?
Well, I think they do not really understand the purpose of the gold dinar.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
Ni Aziz or Hadi and the leaders in Kelantan, they did not really understand the gold dinar. They thought that it is going to be like the ringgit, like a local currency. Instead of using this paper currency, you use gold. But that would be a very big mistake. If you use gold, people will take the gold, but they will not use it in their transaction. They will keep the gold because over time, gold will appreciate in value. So if you have a ringgit in paper money, and you buy 1 ringgit worth of gold, then you keep that gold, the gold will appreciate in value over time. But if you receive ringgit, the ringgit will actually depreciate in value. So the gold dinar that I was talking about is not for local usage, not to be a local currency. It is to be a currency for the settlement of trade.
Your argument would be the gold dinar would be a currency for the settlement of trade. If we flash back during the time of the Prophet, our Prophet used 6 types of currency, and even then there's the dinar, the dirham, and the fulus. Of course, I agree with you that we use dinar as a currency for international trade settlement, but why can't we use dirham as our internal currency?
Well, if you use dirham in the form of gold coins or in the form
Silver
of coins, silver coin, again the silver value will appreciate. So people gaining access to this coin would not want to part with it because if he keeps it, the value would increase. So what will happen, as happened in Kelantan when they issued the gold dinar? People took the gold dinar and kept it as savings, and they continued to use the paper money, because paper money can depreciate, can appreciate, but gold is something that is a savings which has value all the time. Most probably it will appreciate.
Then again, Tun, Kelantan minted the first version 3 years after you minted the gold dinar in 2006. But when they first minted the gold dinar, it was just gold dinar. Fast forward about 4 years, in 2010, they minted the second version of the dinar, both the dinar and the silver dirham. And with that, they started to transact basically the silver dirham. Even in Malaysia, I mean, you were born in 1925, right? In 1924, the last silver ringgit was minted. I mean, I have, this is our silver ringgit. If you see in Jawi, you can see satu ringgit. So, historically, even Malaysia, before we were given these IOU notes by the colonial masters, we were using silver or gold for that matter for our currency. Why can't we return to that system? Because when the colonial masters came and gave us IOU notes and said, our ship might be coming later, you take this note, you can go to Penang or Singapore and get your silver. I mean, that was how we were caught into using paper money. So historically, Malaysia, and even in your state of Kedah, they use kupang. Kelantan, they use dinar matahari. Why can't we revert back to that history in the usage of the dinar and dirham?
Well, for example, if this is worth how much is this? $1?
That is,
yes,
it's satu ringgit.
Satu ringgit. Yes. Today it was worth much more. As silver,
yes,
this amount of silver is worth much more. So if you use this, people will tend to keep this, because in future this will be worth much more. At the same time, of course, the paper money will actually depreciate. So you use paper money to transact, because then you don't keep the paper money. But on the other hand, if you use the paper money to buy this, in 10 years' time, until now, for example, you would have saved quite a lot of money. And people use this as decoration, as pound. They use this for their kursang and things like that. The same happens to gold. So gold as a local currency, or silver, precious metal as a local currency, is really not going to function the way currency works, because the value of the gold or the silver will always appreciate, and people will tend to keep that and use paper money instead. That is why now we are using paper money, although we know they have silver coins and gold coins before, but by now all the silver coins and gold coins would have been hoarded, and when they need the money, they can sell that at a much higher value than the printed value on the coin.
Wouldn't that make Malaysians richer? I mean, we are used to be known as Suvarna Bhumi, right? So if we will start using the dinar and dirham, the rich, we would be phasing out paper money, and we would actually keep actual wealth in line with the economic downturn that the world is suffering. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the state of Utah, last year they had just legalized gold and silver coins as an alternative to the US dollar. I mean, even the Americans are skeptical of the US dollar. Why can't we be more vigilant and more skeptical of what's happening now?
No, if you use gold or silver, the fact remains that the value of things that you can buy with gold or silver would be much more than in paper currency. Therefore, if you pay in gold or silver, you're paying a very high price for whatever you buy. Whereas with paper currency, the price is in accordance with the market value of the currency, which has depreciated. So actually the price of goods would have depreciated against gold or silver, but against the dollar there will be depreciation, but it will not be very much. So people would tend to use the paper money rather than this, because this would normally be hoarded as savings.
Even though it used to be part of our history.
Yeah, it was. In those days, inflation was not very high. I remember when I was a small boy, we used to take 1 cent coin, and go to the shop and buy 2 items. At that time, the value of the coins was very high, and therefore you can use it to buy quite a lot of things. But today, if you have that coin, you go to the shop to buy, you can still buy a lot of goods. But why should you use this to buy goods when you can use paper money? And the price, if it is the same, then you get something at a price that is basically lower than if you use gold.
To hold on to your thoughts while we take a short break.